Hello, welcome to Read Through the Word. Today is Friday, February 21st, and it's just great to have you here today. I hope you're doing well. Today we're going to be talking in Leviticus, and we're talking about the scapegoat. Leviticus 16 verses 6 through 8 says, Aaron will present his own bull as a sin offering to purify himself and his family, making them right with the Lord. Then he must take the 2 male goats and present them to the Lord at the entrance of the tabernacle. He is to cast sacred lots to determine which goat will be reserved as an offering to the Lord and which will carry the sins of the people to the wilderness of la-Azazel. Today we're going to talk about that word, la-Azazel. Down in your notes, I put the Hebrew there. This word is used in Leviticus 16 verses 8, 10, and 26. And if you go to Bible Hub, which is really helpful, you can easily find the Hebrew for any verse. And so if you look up these verses, it'll show you, the English words next to the Hebrew translation. And the word in the Hebrew translation in each of these verses says la-Azazel. And la is a preposition word. So sometimes in Hebrew, the preposition like to or for can be smushed together with the actual word. Sometimes it's separate depending on which preposition it is, but sometimes it's actually put together with the rest of the Hebrew word. And in this case it is. So la-Azazel could be to, for, or as. In other words, it's a preposition that could have multiple meanings. Most of the time in the verses, it looks like they translate it as to or for Azazel, but sometimes they also say as Azazel. So why is this word and this concept important? Well, I want us to look kind of at a comparison between Leviticus chapter 16, 7 through 10. I put in the notes to the NRS VUE version and the NLT, both good. It's just different. It's a good reminder to us too that Hebrew is not a definite, the language of Hebrew when translated, an ancient Near Eastern language, when translated into English, does not always have an exact translation or even an understandable translation. There are words that people still translators just don't know what it would translate to. Or sometimes they're guessing, or sometimes it could be more than one thing based on context or the grammar or whatever it is. So just a good reminder, it is not always crystal clear. So in this case, let's look at these 2 different translations. And specifically, I want to kind of focus on the end of the section where it says, the goat on which the lot fell for Azazel shall be presented alive before the Lord to make atonement over it, that it may be sent away into the wilderness to Azazel. So Azazel is not the wilderness. It's sent away into the wilderness to Azazel. And the NLT says the scapegoat chosen will be kept alive when it is sent away to Azazel in the wilderness. So there are a couple different ways that this is translated, and those 2 translations are fairly close. There's a few differences, but I kind of wanted to show you the just some of the possibilities there. But it's very clear that Azazel is possibly a place, but it's also possibly translated, that preposition la-Azazel, for. So what does it mean? Well, we're not completely certain of the exact meaning of the word, but based on context and other clues that linguists use to translate, it can be considered a proper name of a place or a power, a spiritual power, even possibly a demon. The goat is not sacrificed. We know that there's lots cast, and one is going to be sacrificed, the other one's going to be kept alive, and it's released to or for Azazel. There were pagan cultures that had similar things. For example, there were several Hittite rituals that feature the transfer of evil to an animal that is sent away. The difference, and this is a huge difference, is that in similar pagan rituals, something like this would be considered an appeasement to an angry God. Like, we're going to appease an angry God through this sort of scapegoat type thing. But of course, with the Israelites, that is not the case at all. Again, God differs himself. He makes himself distinct and unique and sovereign. And because the hands are placed on the head of this goat, and the sins and the rebellion of Israel are symbolically placed on this goat, and it's a person is appointed to make sure it is brought into the wilderness. And imagine, just watching this goat walk away, thinking this is the symbol of all of the sins of Israel going out. But it's not to appease an angry God. And we know that because just previous to this scapegoat being sent away, being released, the sacrifice of the first goat happened. The first goat was sacrificed, and so atonement was made. This was the Day of Atonement, right? The atonement was made, and then the scapegoat is sent to Azazel. So atonement for sins have already been made, and this live goat is a symbol that not only are sins atoned for, but all of the sins and rebellion are actually, there's this picture of it all being released, never to see again. And that's what made the Israelites' tradition so different. And it seems odd to think that they might have been thinking of some kind of spiritual power for the meaning of Azazel, or a place. And there are, there's a lot of different things to support that. You can do some more digging into it. I enjoyed learning about this topic. But basically, we know that something about this goat is going to carry the sins away, going to carry all these sins while it's still alive, but it's never going to come back. And that someone or something it's going to be given to this. And I just think that's such a profound thought, such a profound picture, that this small animal would be the symbol to carry away the sins of Israel. And I also thought about, too, the way the word scapegoat is used today. We sometimes talk about it as, a scapegoat taking on sort of the blame for somebody else. And it's not always used in a good way. We're not like, oh, it's so beautiful, that's a scapegoat they're taking on. It's usually not a positive connotation. It's, this person's getting all the blame and they don't deserve it. Now, I understand the goat didn't deserve it, but today the idea of a scapegoat is really that someone is getting blamed for something else, for someone else's wrongdoing. Who is the scapegoat? Who are we going to put the blame on? And I think about all the times in our own lives, in my own life, where it is so much easier to blame someone or something else instead of taking responsibility for it. Because taking responsibility for something, let's just admit it, it's not always fun. It's not always pleasant. It's not always comfortable. But I have always found that when I do face responsibility for something, again, not easy, not comfortable, in the end, on the other side of things, there's a relief that a loving God has taken, through Jesus, has taken that blame for me. And I think it's important for us to remember too that we aren't created to take the sins of others upon ourselves. Just like we need to take responsibility for ourselves and not put the blame on others, there might be times too where in a relationship or a friendship or at work or whatever it is, that sometimes we might take on sort of another person's sin or shortcoming or the blame of what they did. Sometimes we kind of can take that on, especially I think those of us who struggle with kind of wanting to please people or to make everything right and keep the peace. But it's really important that others learn to take responsibility for themselves too. So we don't want to take the opportunity away from someone else to go, hey, you know, you have the opportunity to make this right, to take responsibility, and for them to feel the relief of forgiveness. So we can take responsibility for our sins, and we can let others take the responsibility for their sins, offer grace, ask for grace and forgiveness for ourselves. But the scapegoat can just really represent a beautiful picture that the sacrifice has already been made. The sins have been atoned for. And we can take responsibility for what we've done, knowing that someone else carried it for us. Thanks for joining me here today, friends, and we'll see you next time on Read Through the Word.